Oh, thank you, folks, for letting me know that I am muted. How you guys doing? Sound is always important. I would say that of the senses, it's probably one of the top five that I like to give off during these live streams. I have tried doing them just via smell, and it's not been the best. Anyway, let me start over. Welcome, everybody. Hello. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. I'm Lee Camp. Thanks for being here. This is awesome. This is exciting. We're going to talk about, and it's also a little scary. We're going to talk about how Joe Biden is set to hit strike seven countries in the first month of 2024. I'm going to be getting into that. I'm going to be getting into the ramifications of the ICJ that has already, we're already seeing ramifications taking place. Holly's asking about the seven countries in 5 years. No, I'm talking about seven countries in 1 month that that Biden is striking. Of course, the seven countries in 5 years was about overthrowing them, which we ultimately did, I think, all of those. Anyway, be getting into that. Also getting into so many other important things, such as Israel and the U.S. and the U.K. and several other countries claiming that the UN is now part of Hamas, and they're impressive proof of that. All right, so all that's coming up and much more. Please hit subscribe, hit share, and let's do this, okay? And really, it's mainly on you. I'm just here as an escort. But so this is from Mint Press. They do great work talking about how already Joe Biden has bombed, or his administration, the military-industrial complex, which, let's be honest, does not change really depending on the president. I mean, the number of bombings that went down under Trump were barely different in terms of sheer scale than the number that have gone down under other presidents. Under Donald Trump's first year, it was 40,000 bombs dropped. Under Obama, 26,000 bombs dropped in his final year. Obviously, that's more under Trump, but it's still not a significant change in the military-industrial complex and the ongoing endless war. Anyway, back to this post. Mint Press says, in the first month of 2024, Biden has already bombed Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Somalia. So that has already happened. And we're in January 29th of 2024. So why am I saying seven countries? Well, first of all, I am adding the bombing of Palestine onto that list because, the only reason that Palestine is not a country is because Israel and the UN and others have made sure to, really Israel and the US and the main ones, made sure to stop the people of Palestine from being able to have their own sovereignty, to have their own freedom. So, if you're going to play this dumb, borderline savage nationalist xenophobia and nation state idea game, then Palestinians get to have their own nation on my book. So that's country number five. So now we're at five out of the seven that I talked about in the title of the U.S. striking. Why have I thrown two more onto the list? Well, these are the updates coming from just the other day. So Jordan, actually, let me show you. First, let me show you how Reuters covered this. So Reuters says Biden faces pressure to strike Iran after U.S. troops have been killed. And now, if you read that headline, and I picked Reuters, but this is the same for all mainstream media. You read that headline, you think, Biden is pressured to strike Iran after U.S. troops are killed. Well, who killed those U.S. troops? It must be Iran, right? That is the answer you would come about if you just think about this title and surmise it, and postulate about it and think a bit about it. But so you continue into the article, the killing of 3 U.S. troops and wounding of dozens more on Sunday by Iran-backed militants is piling political pressure on President Joe Biden to deal a blow directly against Iran. So now we hear Iran-backed militants, and we're going, well, okay, well, what does that even mean, Iran-backed? I mean, the U.S. backs militants around the world. We have funded and armed Al-Qaeda offshoots at times. So you could call Al-Qaeda U.S.-backed, a U.S.-backed militant group. Al-Nusra, an Al-Qaeda offshoot. We have funded and armed them. So you could call Al-Nusra a U.S.-backed militant group. So to say this, Iran backed, U.S. backed, and it's okay. Well, if we're playing that game, well, then the genocide against Palestinians right now is absolutely U.S. backed. I mean, the bombs being dropped on Palestinians, many of them are American-made bombs. The bombs being shipped over there, tens of thousands since just October 7th, have been shipped to Israel to facilitate this genocide. The U.S. has admitted to having sent special forces to Israel. Now, they claim they're just there for advisory reasons, but that still means U.S. special forces are there to help facilitate this genocide. On top of that, you have the New York Times, and I covered this the other day. The New York Times also admitting, according to administration and government sources, that the CIA is helping Israel assassinate Palestinians. So, and you have the U.S. military flying drones over Gaza in order to give information to Israel to facilitate this genocide. Okay, all of that you take together and you go, wow, that is one very U.S.-backed genocide, is it not, folks? Okay, so U.S.-backed genocide against Gazans, against Palestinians, and that is why I put them on the list of countries the U.S. has bombed already in 2024 this year. But so you get into this Reuters article. Still, we don't know where this happened or by who. We've just heard Iran-backed militants, and we have not heard anything about a location. So you're reading this article and you're going, wow, the Iran killed U.S. troops where? In Europe? In the U.S.? Where did they kill them? And you keep reading. Biden's response options could range. They still haven't said where the hell these 3 troops were killed. Could range anywhere from targeting Iranian forces outside to even inside Iran, or opting for a more cautious retaliatory attack solely against the Iran-backed militants responsible, experts say. Okay, again, we hear about Iran-backed militants. Still never heard who these militants are or where it happened. American forces in the Middle East have been attacked more than 150 times by Iran-backed forces in Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and off the coast of Yemen since the Israel-Hamas war erupted in October. Now, let's remember, this is not an Israel-Hamas war. This is an Israel genocide. This is, even if you wanted to call it a war, which it's not, when you commit genocide, you're just obliterating a people, ethnic cleansing. It's not a war with them. That would imply some sort of even remotely even fighting ability. This is instead a genocide. But even if you wanted to call it a war, it would be an Israel-Palestinians war, an Israel-Gaza war, but they don't call it that because that would make people side with, guess what, the Palestinians. Instead, they call it the Israel-Hamas war to subtly remind you that this is just against Hamas, right? As we kill 26,000 people, over 26,000 now. And if you count wounded and missing, you're at 100,000. But 26,000 people, 70% are women and children. Over 40%, it's like 43, 45% are just children. And we're calling it a war. Yeah, right. Anyway, so this article says Iran-backed forces in Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and off the coast of Yemen. Now, anybody with half a brain cell would pause there and go, why are Americans in all of those places? Like, do we own the world? Is that what we're just supposed to assume, that the U.S. owns the world and we can just have troops in every goddamn country, even countries that don't want us there, such as Iraq, such as Syria, such as Jordan, such as Yemen? So we have these U.S. troops in all these countries. Many of them have not even asked us to be there. And the ones who have asked us to be there have usually done it, with immense bribery or some other form of pressure where they're like, all right, you can have your base in the whatever corner of the country. Anyway, but still, despite all of this, we have not yet heard, we're like 2/3 of the way through this article, where the hell these U.S. troops were killed by militants that we're not being told what militant group they were. Now we get down to, until Sunday's attack on a remote outpost known as Tower 22 near Jordan's northeastern border with Syria, the strikes have not killed U.S. troops nor wounded so many. So finally, Reuters, kind of in a backwards way, has admitted this happened in Jordan. Now, here's the interesting thing, is if you were to ask your average American, probably even now that this stuff has happened, but especially before this strike, if you would ask your average American, are U.S. troops in Jordan what do you think they'd say? I think 97% of Americans, unless they go, well, I guess they're in Jordan because they're everywhere. Unless they say that, I imagine 97% are going to go, no, U.S. troops in Jordan? I haven't heard shite about Jordan. And no one even mentioned Jordan. Why would U.S. troops be in Jordan? But U.S. troops are all over the world. Thank you so much, Habib, for the donation. And I'm going to be talking about the UNRWA in a moment as well. But so Americans don't even know U.S. troops are there, but we're there, and because we own the world, apparently. And now they've been struck by people that, guess what, live in the region, which, why are they there? Why are you allowed to be in your own home country? But we still have not been told who this militant group is. They never in this article say who this militant group is. And it's probably either because they don't know, or really probably more likely because describing it makes you think it's not just an Iran thing, where we're supposed to believe that anybody who struck or killed these U.S. troops is just Iran backed. Now, who knows what Iran backed means? I have seen non kind of U.S. propaganda outlets like Al Jazeera also calling this militant group Iran backed. Now, they don't call it that in the title because they're not doing U.S. propaganda, but what does that mean? It could mean, Iran gave them a few dollars. It could mean Iran is fine with them existing. I don't know, but it doesn't really matter. Like I've said, if you start saying U.S. backed on everything the U.S. has supported, then you'd be covering just about every militant group on the face of the earth is U.S. backed in one way or another, or used to be, or once was, or whatever. But anyway, so the U.S. very likely is going to, and when you see an article like this by Reuters saying pressure on Biden mounts, well, that's part of how they actually increase the pressure on the U.S. government to do these things, to strike other countries, to blow up other people's, is by having the corporate overlords hey, let's put out an article that says that it is buffering. Let's see. I think I'm back on, but it did freeze there for a moment. But hopefully things are working again. But anyway, so Biden is very likely to strike Iran in one way or another. Maybe outposts that are not inside Iran. The U.S. does not. This is the thing. The U.S. wants to collapse Iran. The U.S. does not want a full-on hot war with Iran. There are way too many things that could spin out of control, including nuclear exchanges with other countries like Russia. On top of that, Iran is a rather powerful, well-put-together country compared to, say, Iraq, where we knew we could, along with killing a million innocent people, we could easily dismantle Iraq. Anyway, so the U.S. wants to collapse Iran without actually going to full-on war with Iran. Now, I will say that Israel would love to drag the U.S. into this regional war even more so than we already are, because then it entrenches the U.S. with Israel in their genocide against Palestinians. It entrenches them. I mean, the U.S. and Israel are already attached at the tip of the dingle. So it's not like Israel really needs more support from the U.S. But in terms of the U.S. actually, fighting boots on the ground, as they say, slightly different. Anyway, but here's something else that, it's just a coincidence. This is just a coincidence, right? There's no meaning behind what I'm about to tell you at all. Don't read anything into the timing of this at all, okay? This is completely separate from the fact that Iran-backed militants just killed 3 U.S. soldiers, and now Biden is going to strike Iran. Now, the reason I said 7 countries is he very well may strike some sort of Iran connection in Jordan. He may strike an Iran connection in some other country, but either way, it'd be Jordan and Iran that the U.S. government, the U.S. military would be striking, would be bombing, which would make 7 countries in the first month of 2024. And remember, the Democrats are the party of peace. They're bringing us peace, right? Can you feel it? Can you feel the peace they brought us? Okay, don't read anything into this timing at all. But Iran-backed militants killed three soldiers, U.S. soldiers, and just 7 days ago, Russia and Iran finalize a 20-year deal that will change the Middle East forever. A 20-year oil deal was just finalized between Iran and Russia. And suddenly the U.S., now the U.S. has hated Iran for a long time, but the U.S. hasn't talked about bombing Iran, at least not since Trump assassinated their general. After those few months, it hasn't been talked about again until today, and it just happens to be 7 days after, or 9 days or something, after Russia and Iran finalize a 20-year deal for oil between the two of them. And yet again, these are two of the countries that are outside of the petrodollar, infuriating the U.S. They're outside of the U.S.'s central banking's tentacles, and it's infuriated the U.S. for a long time. Part of the reason the U.S. wanted a proxy war in Ukraine to begin with. But, could there be any connection between the U.S. suddenly deciding that these Iran-backed militants have gone too far and we need to strike Iran with a week after Iran and Russia finalize this deal? I'm sure there's no connection at all. Coincidence. Sort of like another coincidence that has just happened. Very important coincidence that you should not read anything into at all. But as you know, the ICJ, the International Criminal Court of Justice, has just come down with a decision a few days ago. I already covered it last episode. A few days ago, basically is an interim ruling not throwing out the accusations of genocide against Israel. Now, some people have tried to play this, including the Wall Street Journal, have tried to play this as a pro-Israel decision by the court to continue genocide charges against them, which is so funny to just watch people try and spin it that way. But no, the International Court, which is the highest legal entity, the International Court has not thrown out the accusations and charges of genocide against Israel, and they reiterated many times that Israel needs to, not harm civilians, needs to not target civilians, needs to protect civilians, needs to stop all genocidal behavior. Those type of things. Now, this infuriates Israel because it looks terrible for them, but on top of them, their support globally is collapsing. The support for an apartheid state to commit genocide and ethnic cleansing against a people is collapsing globally in a major way. And by the way, I'm also gonna destroy Bill Maher in just a few minutes. I am going to, you got to use those words right now in order to get clicks. So I'm going to decimate, Lee Camp decimates Bill Maher. I'm going to obliterate Bill Maher. Bill Maher is not going to know his head from his ass before, by the time I'm done. Lee Camp is going to just wreck Bill Maher. That's coming up in a minute. Anyway, so here's the coincidence, though, that it didn't read nothing into it. The day after, the International Court, which is a UN court, says that that Israel, basically, there's enough evidence of genocide to continue the case, is what they said. The day after, Israel has found evidence. It just dropped on their desk the day after, has found evidence that 12 members of the UN group, the UNRWA, the UN group that helps Palestinians, the UN office that helps Palestinians and Gazans, 12 of them were involved in the October 7th Hamas uprising and hostage taking and killing of folks, at least in the firefights, although many of those killed were by the IDF, but I'll get more into that in a moment. But the day after, Israel has said, we have evidence that the UNRWA was involved in the October 7th. That's what they've discovered. Okay. Uh, and look, there's no refuting that at all, right? It just so happens, because here are your options. You have two options in whether to believe this or not. One is that, yes, just coincidentally, Israel stumbled on this evidence the day after the ruling, or number two, that that Israel had this evidence already. I mean, if you want to believe the charges, Israel had the evidence and they were just being nice to not reveal it. Israel, yeah, they had proof that the UN workers were involved in October 7th, and they just, it's really polite not to reveal that stuff. But then after the court ruling, they were like, if they're going to be mean to us, then we're going to reveal this stuff we found. Those are your two. If you want to believe the stuff, those are your two options right there. Now, let me bring you some facts about this. So following those accusations by Israel, the following 7 countries have suspended UNRWA funding based on Israeli claims that 12 of the agency's 30,000 employees took part in the Hamas attacks. US, Canada, UK, Finland, Australia, Italy, and Netherlands. Norway and Ireland said they would not follow suit. Switzerland has not decided yet till the accusation is clarified. Here are some facts about the UNRWA. It has 30,000 employees, 13,000 of which are in Gaza. However, fewer than 13,000 are now in Gaza because Israel has murdered many of them. Israel has murdered over 100 UN employees since October 7th. That is the most UN people to ever be murdered in any conflict ever, because Israel, unlike in most conflicts, is targeting UN workers. In Gaza, the UNRWA runs 183 schools, 22 health facilities, and 7 women's centers, among several other facilities. Its schools are attended by 286,000 students in Gaza, while its medical facilities have 3.4 million average visits per year, according to UN data. So that's what the UNRW does, and yet you have all of these countries pulling their funding because Israel suddenly stumbled upon all this evidence the day after the court refused to throw out the charges. Now, here's some interesting information from Aaron Mate. After the U.S. and allies cut off funding to the UNRWA, New York Times reporters Ronan Bergman and Patrick Kingsley launder Israel's stated pretext that a handful of employees were involved in October 7th. The New York Times conveniently omits that Israeli officials have admitted that a lot of their so-called intelligence about UNRWA is a result of interrogation of militants, aka torture. So Israel's been torturing Hamas-linked people, if that's actually true, but it very well might be. Israel's been torturing Hamas, and then what do you know? They admit to all these things that Israel wants them to admit to, such as working with the UN. To continue from Aaron, perhaps this is why we learned that Western officials have not been able to verify Israel's claims. I wonder why the U.S. hasn't been able to verify these claims that just fell on their desk the day after the court found against Israel and found that Israel is essentially committing genocide. Perhaps this is why not been able to verify Israel's claims. And even though the U.S. has yet to corroborate the Israeli claims itself, American officials say they found them credible enough to warrant suspending aid. Even if every torture-derived claim about this small group of UNRWA workers were true, nothing can justify cutting off a lifeline for millions of Palestinian refugees during a genocide. But in U.S. eyes, collective punishment against Palestinians is a credible tactic of genocide. So even the New York Times has admitted that their so-called evidence has come from torture of Hamas militants, or probably just people linked to Hamas in one way or another. And again, I think you should read nothing in to the fact that Israel stumbled across this evidence the day after the ICJ came down with the ruling. You should and successfully has gotten 7 or more countries to withdraw all funding, many of them the largest funders of such things, to withdraw all funding from the UNRWA, which helps Palestinians get things like food, water, education, things like that. And we are seeing right now that something like, wasn't it something like 90%? I'll say 70 just to be safe, but I think it was closer to 90% of Palestinians are going without food right now. I mean, of Gazans are going without food right now. One of the important things the UN does for them, tries to get food to them. But of course, Israel has shut off all of that aid and is now taking steps to cut off other efforts to help Palestinians in any way, which is, of course, what you do when you're involved in ethnic cleansing. And here's another coincidence. Again, I want you to read nothing into this, okay? This just pure coincidence. Here is this is a former Israeli cabinet minister, or let's see, the former Israeli official. Her name is Noga Arbel. And here she is. This is before the ICJ ruling. This is January 4th. She's saying this. So remember, the ICJ ruling has not happened. Israel had not made any accusations against the UNRWA yet. And here's because there's a podcast photo version of the show, I'm going to try and read this while she says it. Our main goal in the war is to eliminate the threat and not to neutralize it. And we know how to eliminate terrorists. It is more difficult for us with an idea. UNRWA is the source of the idea. They're born in all kinds. Terrorism is born in all kinds of methods. Now, you got to remember that when she says terrorism, she means all Palestinians, really. Because they call essentially anybody who's Palestinian or in Gaza, they call them terrorists, or they call them terrorist sympathizers or something. Anyway. Also, all kinds of methods. And it will be impossible to win the war if we do not destroy UNRWA. So there is public discussion among Israeli ministers, Israeli officials, about destroying this UN agency before Israel has come out with these sudden accusations that the UN was involved, that these UN workers were involved. 12 people out of the 30,000 that work for UNRWA were involved in October 7th. She says, and this destruction must begin immediately. And it's not relevant to talk about it a day after. The day is now. We must act to deal. Basically, we must murder UN workers to be able to successfully perpetrate our genocide, is honestly what I'm hearing from what she's saying. And that was, again, before the accusations by Israel claiming that 12 people from UNRWA were involved in October 7th. But again, don't read anything into that. No, that is just a coincidence. There is no connection whatsoever. I wanted to bring this to you as well. This is, in terms of the big ICJ decision that came down a couple of days ago, this is a global map of the countries that support that decision, that support the interim decision, saying there is proof, there is enough evidence of genocide to keep going. But look at this map. This is the global South standing up. This is the global South actually fighting against this genocide in one form or another, while the Western world, the global North, does not, while they remain silent or in some cases actually endorsing this genocide. The map, for those of you listening to the podcast, highlights much of the global South, including much of Africa, much of Latin America, and some of Asia. But the reason it's in different colors, for those of you looking at it, is it's basically differentiating between those taking a lead role in the ICJ case, those referring crimes to the International Criminal Court, those taking a lead role in the ICJ case and referring crimes to the ICC, those who express support, those who supported international legal action. So all of those different colors that you see on that map can be grouped together in terms of support the ICJ a case against Israel. Meanwhile, all of the countries you see, basically the rest of the countries you see not colored in, it's because they have not voiced support for the ICJ case. So, of course, that is the global north, the United States, Canada, UK, Europe, etc. Anyway, this speaks to the fact that the global south is coming into their own in many ways. They're not falling for U.S. propaganda as much as they used to. They're no longer, or many of them are trying to find ways out of the petrodollar, which is a long process. It is not an easy one. Economically, it's very risky, but many of them are starting that process of getting out from under the petrodollar, out from under the central banking tentacles that have crushed them for so long. And it means that they are able to make decisions like this, able to stand up against genocide. So it is a big and impressive step. Meanwhile, here's what you're getting from U.S. politicians, Democrats no less. It's kind of hard to see, but a bunch of protesters showed up outside of Senator Fetterman's office. You know that John Fetterman, is the recently elected a couple of years ago senator who, he's from Pennsylvania, and he's one of us, right? He's a blue collar guy. He wears a sweatshirt to the Senate when he goes to work, and he doesn't wear a suit. He refuses the rules that say you have to wear a suit, and he's one of us guys. But he has been rabidly pro-genocide, pro-Israel as they commit genocide. And anyway, a bunch of protesters showed up outside of his building. I'm unclear as to whether it's his apartment or it's his it just says protesters in Pennsylvania, or it could be an office. I don't know. And what does he do? He literally goes on the roof of the building with an Israeli flag. This is a senator of a building in the middle of the night, rolled up Israeli flag while anti-genocide protesters are out front. And this is a Democrat, right? So you got to remember what your Democrats stand for. It's not just the Republicans that are pro-war, pro-genocide, pro-death and destruction, sociopaths. It's also the Democrats. This is a Democrat on a rooftop in the middle of a GD night, holding up an Israeli flag while Israel bombs and kills children all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. It really is. And, they're chanting things like, you support genocide, you can't hide, you support genocide. And he's up there for like hours holding up an Israeli flag. I mean, it's totally insane. This is the level of genocidal that our government has become. It's amazing. Amazing. But of course, it's not just our government. All right, now I'm going to obliterate Bill Maher, because, again, you got to use that language to get any clicks around here. I am going to destroy Bill Maher. All right, so here's a clip from Bill Maher the other night. Let me pause here and say, everybody, please click thumbs up. It takes you 2 seconds. What do you lose? What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? Why are you guys not good? Why do you want a thumbs up? Click thumbs up, click share. And remember, I do these live streams free for everyone, 4 days a week. Yes, there are a lot of ways you can still support the show that are not free, but I do 4 hours, or it's really more than 4 hours, but 4 hours free a week for you guys. And often you're not going to be alerted to these things, even if you hit subscribe, even if you hit follow. So please just show up. 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Tens of thousands of you are watching each one of these, and it is awesome to see you guys to show up and be a part of this. And for those of you that are supportive and really sharing and let people know about these live streams, it means the world, because I am one of the most censored comedian commentators in America. TV show banned around the globe. My last YouTube channel, which had 250,000 subscribers, banned around the globe. My TikTok banned around the globe. My podcast was banned from Spotify. It's back up under a new name. It's called The Lee Camp Show on Spotify. Anyway, But it is you guys that keep this show going. So thank you so much. Honestly, I can't, for those of you that are supportive, that really are here, showing up, I can't thank you enough. But anyway, let me get to this. And one last point is when you click subscribe on YouTube, again, free, and my main channel is Rumble, but when you click subscribe on YouTube, if you click the bell icon, which is supposed to alert you, now they give you different bell options, right? Used to be you could just click the bell and be alerted, but they've changed that a couple of years ago, I think, but they changed it as well. You can go back and check this. Click the bell icon, and then you click how many of the alerts you want from my channel. And I hope you click all so that you can find out about all my videos. But I would love for you to click that bell and click all. If you are already following and you don't know which bell icon you've click the bell and it'll give you the options or whatever. Okay. Now I'm going to totally tear limb from limb Bill Maher. Woohoo! Okay, so Bill Maher, most of you know who he is. He's, hack comedian. And when I say hack comedian, I mean, like, have you ever watched the guy stand up? Oh, painful. Oh, woo, painful. Here's the thing. There are comedians I disagree with, like politically, who I know are talented comedians. There are comedians who I think largely support the liberal worldview and support, liberal destruction of the world. Like, I think Stephen Colbert, back when he did the Colbert Report, I think it was some of the best comedy writing that we've ever seen. But it was still supporting the liberal worldview. So I can disagree with someone and not call them a hack. Bill Maher, hack. Amazingly gigantic hack. But his stand-up routines, he claims to write himself. His show, he can't write, which is why his stand-up routines probably suck so bad. His show, he is incapable of writing, apparently, because when the writer strikes it's now happened to him twice. He gets really angry with the writers, and he claims he funds some of their salary, but not while he's a scab at the same time. He actually announced he was going to be a scab, but then the strike ended, I think, before he actually did it. But anyway, he has teams of writers. He can't write his show on his own, which, look, I don't begrudge these people, rich comedians having writers. If I had a big show, I'd probably have writers, but I begrudge them the fact that they're incapable of doing a show without writers. I did my show Redacted Tonight with 0 writers for 8 years, a weekly TV show. So I think it's incredibly hypocritical of them. Thank you, Don, for the donation. Anyway, hack comedian claims to be a liberal, but he's actually, believe it or not, I know liberal is right wing enough. Like liberals pro CIA, pro FBI, pro war, pro proxy war in Ukraine, pro genocide in Israel. So liberal is disgusting enough, but he's actually pulling to the right on a lot of domestic issues. You hear a lot of the things he's been saying, they fit perfectly with the MAGA crowd, but which is hilarious because the way he claims to be a liberal is that he hates Donald Trump. Anyway, here he is talking about Israel and the genocide they're committing. He doesn't use that term, of course, right? They're just fighting a war. They're just fighting a war against mostly children.
So here's the other group. Under 35, Trump leads Biden. Wow. You lose the kids. And this is mostly...
So, sorry, you missed the beginning of this. He's discussing how Biden is losing votes, and he's losing under 35-year-olds.
So here's the other group. Under 35, Trump leads Biden. Wow. Yeah. You lose...
Sorry, realized the volume was screwed.
Group. Under 35, Trump leads Biden. Wow. Yeah. You lose the kids. And this is mostly, I think, because of a wedge issue. I don't know if people really know what a wedge issue is. That means a wedge within the parties.
So, first of all, he talks to you like you're an idiot. You've never heard of a wedge issue? I don't know if people know what a wedge issue is. I actually don't think he thinks people don't know that. I just think he wants to appear smart, and fans maybe think that it looks smart to talk to people like they're 6 years old. Anyway.
Something that divides people within the Democratic Party. And for that is the kids love Hamas.
Okay. First of all, completely false bullshit, false dichotomy, all of those things. The kids love Hamas. Basically, if you're anti-genocide now, they call you they call you a Hamas lover. It's all garbage. It's all lies. And so, but on top of that, you'll notice that in that split second, he smiles because he thinks he's going to get a laugh. He gets zero laugh. Now, the reason he thought he was going to get a laugh is because he thinks everyone agrees with him. Oh, these crazy kids love him. But the crowd who loves him, right? These are his fans. The crowd who loves him is probably thinking, because I've been a comedian for 25 years, they're probably thinking like, wait, what's he talking about? Because they don't know anyone who loves Hamas. They might know people who are anti-genocide. They might know people who don't want to see bombs rain down on children. But they're going, I don't know kids who are pro-Hamas. But then he adds another punchline to get a laugh, which the crowd then realizes they're supposed to laugh, and so they do. Anyway, watch again how little gets zero laugh.
Democratic Party, and for that is the kids love Hamas.
See, that breath, he does that breath when he thinks he's getting a laugh. There was not a chuckle. This is an audience of a few hundred people. No one laughs. Then he throws in his extra punchline, which is a cue to the audience. That was supposed to be a joke.
And who couldn't? Who couldn't resist them? I mean, they behead babies. Yeah. Or do they? Okay.
So he then throws in the they behead babies, which is not true at all. There's been no evidence brought forward, but you'll see in a minute he continues to claim it's true. There's no evidence of the beheading babies. Even Biden, even the Joe Biden White House had to backtrack, had to retract their claim, Biden's claim, that he saw video of Hamas beheading babies. Even the lying liar, sack of liars, oh my God, you're lying, can you ever stop lying, White House, retracted the claim that there's video of Hamas beheading babies.
Oh, this is interesting. Yes. See, now there's something called they say it's a false flag operation. They're calling them, remember 9/11 truthers? These are October 7th deniers.
Yeah.
Well, I'll play a little more because I'm going to break this down in a second.
Yeah.
You've read about this?
Yes, I have.
This is the Washington Post.
By the way, the two people he has on with him are Seth MacFarlane, who here's a good example. I can admit something's funny while thinking the guy is a goddamn moron. Seth MacFarlane, I think Family Guy is a quality show. It gets old after a few episodes, but I think it's when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, Family Guy, very funny. And he's also with Adam Schiff, Congressman Adam Schiff, who is a sack of shift. Adam Schiff is the lead guy. If there was one person in all of Congress who built up and endorsed every lie about Russiagate that has all collapsed, it is Adam Schiff. Everything he said about Russia has completely been obliterated. So if you were him and you had gone in front of America day in, day out, claiming all of this garbage, and now it's all been proven false, how stupid would you look? Why would anyone have you on to talk things again? Why would you ever be on a TV show speaking about anything if you had lied or been that wrong for that long? But here he is on the Bill Maher Show.
This week, a small but growing group denies the basic facts. Some they say Israel staged this to justify their invasion of Gaza. The hostages, not really. They were kidnapped by Israel. The United States is behind the whole thing.
Okay, so he puts forward, and he's reading a Washington Post article, which I'm going to tell you a little about in a second, but Bill Maher puts forward things that no one says. No one. I mean, yes, there's probably 7 lunatics online who say that October 7th didn't happen. And they have to pretend this is a big deal. But as even as Aaron Mate says here in his quote, what Bill Maher's quoting from is a Washington Post article that calls it a small but growing movement. What do you think a small but growing movement means to the Washington Post when they're trying to justify this genocide? They found 8 people and they said it's a small but growing movement. Like, there is no one saying October 7th didn't happen. There are many, such as the New York Times, saying Israel knew it was going to happen for a long time, such as a year beforehand. Even the New York Times has admitted that Israel knew this was going to happen. They might not have known the date, but they knew it was going to happen for up to a year beforehand and supposedly ignored it. Now, you can argue about what that means, but again, no one's saying what he's saying. I mean, if there are, they're lunatics. Sure, there's flat earthers too, and there's people who think that aliens are in their anal cavity right now as we speak. But that doesn't make it a small but growing movement. Besides, you could call anything a small but growing movement. There's a small but growing movement of Americans who put dung beetles into their nostrils and then say they feel high. Like, what does small but growing movement mean? So Mate says about the Washington Post article that Bill Maher's reading from right there. The author purposefully conflates this non-existent movement with independent journalists who point out what's reported in Israel media but censored here, that Israeli forces killed some of their own people on October 7th. So the Washington Post article is conflating two things. One that is essentially non-existent, which is October 7th never happened. It was all CGI. And then a very big movement of people who are quoting things like Israeli media. So, and by the way, I'm in this group, quoting things like Israeli media, quoting things like the New York Times, although it's a tiny little one sentence hidden in their various articles, quoting things such as the police report about the Nova Music Festival, where IDF and Israeli border police killed a lot of people. Quoting things like the interview with the Israeli tank gunner who said she was told to fire on civilians. And she said, aren't there civilians in that building? And the commander said, I don't know, just fire. And so she decided to only fire with her gun instead of her tank. She said that. That's not, I didn't make that up. You can go watch the interview. But of course, they're conflating these two things because when you can't refute something, the key is to lump it in with something that's utterly insane. And that's what Bill Maher is doing, and that's what the Washington Post did.
There's a professor who says, this is a professor in New York, don't take what the media says. They try to say you're supporting rapists and people that behead babies, both of which, we know it's not true.
Before you even hear his response, I just want to say, does that journalist sound insane? Academic professor? That Hamas didn't behead babies and that so far there's been no evidence of rape? Anyway, here's Bill Maher's response to that.
Which, we know it's not true. No, we know it is true. They purposely filmed it.
Utterly false. Utterly false. Do you think if they filmed it, we wouldn't have, that wouldn't have been put everywhere by Israel? Israel would love to have film of Hamas doing this crap. But even the White House had to retract their statement saying there was film, there was proof of this. The babies that were killed on October 7th, many of them, or maybe all of them, were burned in these horrible, horrific burnings, which, as Israel has admitted, those burning, where whole buildings burned, and you had dozens, if not more, of people all burned together. Israel had to reduce the number of dead on October 7th, dead Israelis, from 1,400 to 1,200 because they admitted that many of the burned bodies were Hamas militants. Well, if the burned bodies were Hamas militants, who didn't do the burning? I got an idea. Probably the Hamas militants. If they were burning the people, they didn't burn themselves. So why did they end up burned with the hostages and other innocent people? Because The IDF was just bombing. They were firing tank rounds at whole buildings. We know this. It's called the Hannibal Directive. This isn't even secretive anymore. However, Bill Maher is certain something is real that no one has ever produced proof of.
And we have the footage.
And then both McFarlane and Adam Schiff nod along as if there's any truth to this.
It's very on brand for social media.
And then Seth MacFarlane, Dummy McDumdum over here, tries to add something in, but it's a combination of nonsensical and just conflating things.
And it's very on brand for the planet as far as its relationship with the Jews over many centuries. We have this weird.
Okay, so Seth MacFarlane is doing exactly what Israel wants in their propaganda, which is to conflate Israel with Judaism. These are two separate things. Yes, Israel is a Jewish state, but guess what? You can be Jewish, like myself, and not be a Zionist. There are millions of anti-Zionist Jews. There are millions of Jews around the world who are anti-genocide, like really anti-genocide, not pretend anti-genocide, like the many of the Jews in Israel. So Seth MacFarlane is diving headfirst into that conflation, into that conflating of acting like, oh, well, Bill Maher just talked about Israel and talked about Hamas and therefore Jews. Like, nobody should ever do that. And if anybody you're ever speaking to does that, you say, look, I'll debate with you about this topic, but we weren't talking about Jews in general around the world, because Israel does not equal Jews. And Israel wants you to conflate those two because they want you to believe that any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. It is a careful technique. And Seth MacFarlane dives hook, line, and sinker into it, to mix a metaphor. I don't know if you can dive hook, line, and sinker. I don't know if that would make you the hook, line, and sinker. It'd be weird. Like if you were a hook, line, and sinker, that'd be a weird thing to be. I don't think you should be that.
Weird stalkerish relationship to the Jewish people.
Then he says that, which blows my mind. I have no idea what he's talking about, but it's almost more disturbing than everything else said here. The world has a stalkerish relation to Jews. I'm sorry, I haven't ever felt stalked because I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
It's the most bizarre thing. We have like something like
No, your statement is the most bizarre thing.
60% of the religious-based hate crimes in this country are committed against Jewish people, which are 2% of the population. So what does that tell you?
Well, first of all, if that's even real, which I kind of doubt it is, but if that's even real, yeah, when you're a tiny member, when you're a minority of a population, you tend to get a lot more hate because it's easier to hate and to do these things. But on top of that, if that's real, you know who's creating a lot of the anti-Semitism? Israel. Because Israel's telling you to think that all Jews are Israel and Israel is all Jews. And therefore, if you're anti-genocide, which means you're sane, which means you're a person that cares about other human beings, if you're one of those people that is anti-genocide, all of a sudden, some people are dumb enough to then hate Jews because they see the genocide going on against Palestinians. They say, I'm anti-genocide, therefore I'm anti-Jews. There are some people like that. Now, they're idiots, but they do exist. So Israel is furthering anti-Semitism. They're creating anti-Semitism around this world. They're also diluting the term anti-Semitism to make it mean any criticism of Israel, which means that you say the word anti-Semitism and now it barely means anything because Israel has made it mean nothing.
Like there's something else going on there that, and this is just the latest. You know, this is it's why Israel exists.
Well, and
no, that's not true. Israel is a settler colonial project. Yes, it made it a lot easier to force it through after the Holocaust. That part is true. But the efforts to create Israel stemmed before the Holocaust. It started before the Holocaust. And besides the fact that just because a people were Holocausted, just because there was a genocide committed against the Jews, does not mean that you're then allowed to just commit ethnic cleansing against a new group of people. That's not really how it works. So to say that's why Israel behaves the way it behaves is problematic.
I feel this keenly because I'm the subject of a lot of that hate online. And it's so hard to set the record straight and correct all the disinformation out there. For a while, there was a very well.
Yeah, I'm not even going to keep playing because Schiff says a bunch of garbage, but it is hilarious to hear Adam Schiff, king of disinformation, the face of Russiagate, the face of undermining and arresting and and censoring and destroying all journalism that told the truth for years. I mean, this guy is the face of it. And again, if you're new to my stuff and you have no idea what I stand for or what I believe, I hate Donald Trump as much as anyone. I am left wing. I believe in people and humanism and equality and anti-war and creating evolving past capitalism into a world where we actually can all care for each other and actually live in the post-scarcity world in which we exist, in which there's no reason anyone should be without a roof over their head or without clothing or without food or should be abused. That is what I believe. And I, along with countless others, had their careers and parts of their lives, I wouldn't say I had my life destroyed, but many did, because of the garbage of Russiagate and the McCarthyism connected to it. And Adam Schiff was the front of that disinformation for years. That has all collapsed. It is all collapsed. Even the indictments that that Mueller brought against the clickbait farm in St. Petersburg, even those indictments were dropped by the court because they had no evidence linking clickbait farm to anything the Russian government was doing. Anyway, so this piece of human feces wants to tell you about the problem of disinformation. Okay, I know it's been an hour. I often wrap up in an hour, but I'm going to do another segment, and that segment is only going to be on my locals page and my and rumble.com, but it is free to watch on rumble.com. So join me over there, rumble.com/Lee Camp. Join me over there. But also, if you are new to my stuff and you're not going to make it over to rumble.com/Lee Camp, again, free to watch over there. I do these every 4 days a week. I do them four weekdays. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Only skip Wednesday. So if you'll just join me every weekday. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. And I do them at rumble.com/Lee Camp and youtube.com/Moment of Clarity. Of course, my locals page is the community that supports this show and makes it all possible. So thank you guys. This next segment, well, actually, I'm going to bring you more than one right now, but yeah, I'm going to bring you something about Nancy Pelosi, but also something from the Professor Jeffrey Sachs tearing apart Israel's lies as well. That's coming up right now, rumble.com/Lee Camp, rumble.com/Lee Camp, as well as my YouTube page. Sorry, not my YouTube page, my locals page. So join me over on locals.